polling place. Have you all gone to the polling place with your parents or someone?
Yes.
Okay, so I was on the ballot in 2002. You went? Question already? Okay.
Did you have any experience with like judge when you were, well, before you were a judge?
I did. I actually became a lawyer in 1977, and I was elected as a judge in 2002. So what is that? Over 20 years experience as a lawyer? And I'll tell you a little bit about what I did as a lawyer after I go through the judiciary and the judges and the courts. So I've been a judge for 10 years, and my courtroom is over in the courthouse in Rolling Meadows. Do you know where that is? You go up Wilkie. It's pretty close to here. It's just like about a mile away. And my courtroom is 206, with courtroom number 206. I have the same courtroom every day. And what I do is I hear cases where people are suing other people, mostly for money that they say is owed to them. So for example, if you, probably the first big purchase you're going to want to do when you get older and you have your bank account all ready and you have a driver's license, what's the big thing you're going to try to buy? Yes?
A wedding dress.
Oh! You're like my daughter. My daughter from college comes home and she's always watching that Say Yes to the Dress show. No, I wasn't thinking a wedding dress. Yes?
A really fast car.
Well, I don't know about the really fast, but
I like fast.
a car, yes. A car. Well, as it turns out, I have quite a few cases that come before me in my courtroom, which are car companies suing the owner of the car because they didn't pay when they were supposed to pay.
Oh, this is for you guys.
Yeah. So usually what happens when you buy a car is you sign an agreement, which is a written document, and that agreement says that you're going to pay so much per month, say $300 a month. And if the person gets behind in their payments, maybe they lost their job or something bad happened, or they have really high expenses and they couldn't pay, then the car loan company will sue for, you know, for the money that is owed. And the bad thing that can happen, and that's the thing, you know, when you go to courts, sometimes bad things happen, but we try to do it in a fair way, in a very fair way. And let me just finish this thought, and then I'll answer your question. So what does it mean to be fair? Does anybody have a thought on that? Yes?
Everybody has an equal amount of something.
An equal amount, or maybe equal opportunity? And what does that mean to you? Yes?
That equal people or teams have an equal chance of
Winning or losing. Yes? You have
Like, don't they usually switch off talking, like one person talks and the other?
Exactly. That's a very good point. Because when you're in a courtroom and you're doing a trial, where I'm sitting up there, you know, with the black robe on, and you got the plaintiffs, which are the people that are suing for the money, in our example, the car loan people, and then you have the defendants, the people who owe money on the car. The way it goes is first the plaintiff gets up and comes to my bench and tells me why they are owed the money, and sometimes they also want to try to get the car back or repossess it because they haven't been paid. But I don't make up my mind just from hearing one side, and that's really important to learn in your whole life. When you become parents, you're going to want to hear both sides of every controversy or issue. So after they go sit down, then the defendant comes up, and he will say, or he or she will say, what their defense is. Now, when you haven't paid for a car, what do you think a good defense would be? You have an idea?
Well, they didn't like really work on it, I guess, or they like broke it.
Broke it? Yeah, that might be a good defense. Say, there's actually something called lemon laws, which are passed by the legislature, not the judicial, but that's where, specifically for cars, where the car is, you know, defective. And why should I have to pay on this car because it's defective? That is actually a good defense. It's not the one that I hear the most, though. Does anybody have any idea what defense I might hear the most, especially in this economy. Yes?
I didn't do it.
No, I don't hear that. Now, I want to tell you, let me just go off to the side here a little bit. Or you could say that, but usually that kind of defense it's a good idea. Don't worry, it's a good idea. But my kind of courtroom is, like I said, suing for money. It's nothing like when somebody has committed a crime, you know, when they stole something, or they hurt somebody, they hit them, or did, you know, bad things to people. That's a criminal courtroom, and very often the defendants there will say, I didn't do it. But in a civil courtroom, which is the kind of courtroom that I have, for suing mostly for money, they usually admit they didn't pay. But what do you think they might say?
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to tell you. Oh, what, you have an idea?
They couldn't pay for it.
Exactly. Most of the people that come before me say, I couldn't pay, I lost my job. That's one that I hear a lot. Especially in the economy now, you know, with it being not so great. We hope it's getting better. I think it is getting better, but still there are people who are unfortunate and they don't have the money to pay. Now, is that a defense in the eyes of the law? Would I rule in favor of that person because they lost their job and they couldn't pay?
No.
Who said no? And why do you think no?
Well,
You are correct, by the way, but why do you think no?
well, probably they lost their job for a certain reason or something. I don't
No, I don't ever talk about, you know, the reason why they lost their job. Yes?
Oh well, you're still getting sued.
That's kind of it. Basically what I say to people is, I'm very sorry that you lost your job, but your inability to pay is not a defense. Now, what it might be a good defense to is, once it goes to a judgment against the defendant, like after I've heard both sides and I say, well, Mr. Car buyer, I think you owe the money, and unfortunately I'm going to have to do a judgment against you. But if you lost your job, probably the car company is not going to be able to collect on that judgment. And by collecting, I mean go to your bank and take away your bank money, or go to whoever you do work for if you do have a job and tell them to take some of your wages and pay it to the car company. If there's nothing to collect on, then they're not going to be able to collect. So it's sort of being judgment proof, or, you know, there's a judgment against them, but they can't really collect. They usually, though, do get the car. They go and repossess it. So that's one kind of case I do. You have a question?
Yeah. Have you ever had a case where you've had to interpret more than one law during, or
Yes.
just one?
Yes, quite a bit. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of an example at the moment. But usually there's rules that apply to that, and what we say is that if there's a more specific law, then we'll apply that one. So there might be a general law that says everybody gets their equal say in court, and then there might be something specific to car buying cases. So I would usually follow the car case, you know, that law. But that's a good question. Yes?
How many cases do you do in a day?
A lot. I have the courtroom. I love my job, but it is very busy. Because in my courtroom, when a case finally goes to a trial where people are stepping up and witnesses testify, I'm the one who decides. So it's called a bench trial because I sit up on a bench. As opposed to if it went to a jury of 12 people, and when it's a jury trial, it usually takes a couple of days because it takes longer. So I can do a bench trial in an hour, and I often do. So usually in one day at 9 o'clock or 9:30, I have about 50 cases to hear, but it's just, I'm not hearing the whole thing. It's just like, there's so many steps when you get into lawsuits and litigation. first you have to file the lawsuit. Then you have to serve it on the defendant, meaning a sheriff or somebody comes up to the person and says, here, you've been served. You have to have service. And it's very hard to get service sometimes. So they have to come back to court and ask for it over and over and over. And so there's many steps to it. But they might be short little hearings, but I'll do about 50 at 9 o'clock. And then I'll have longer hearings at 10, 10:30, and 11, one each. And then a long trial at 1:30 in the afternoon. So they're about 60 or 70 cases a day. So it's a lot. Yes?
How do you know if you're doing the right thing?
You know, you just do the best you can, and you try to follow the law. So in the judicial system, which I am, you look to what other courts do to kind of guide you. It's called precedents, and courts will research the law. I'll look at what other cases did, and I try to follow what previous judges did. And then you kind of just try to be fair. Like I said, listening to both sides, not making up your mind until you've heard both sides. And when I first became a judge 10 years ago, and we had to go to new judge school. We had to go to school for 5 days for new judges. And one of the big things that they taught us was, don't make up your mind until you've heard it all. And then, if you need to take a break and go back to your office and look at your notes and look at the cases and think about it, and then come back, that's the best way to get a really fair decision. And hopefully one that's right, but not always. So yes?
You know how there's like shows called like Judge Judy and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Have you ever wanted to be on like a TV show?
Well, that's a funny thing that you should ask, because I actually am Judge Judy in Rolling Meadows. And what do I mean by that? Judge Judy and all of those judge shows that you see on TV, have you ever, anybody seen those? If you've seen one of those judge shows, raise your hand. Okay, they're usually on in the afternoon, like after school. And one time I had to be off for, I had to have surgery, so I was at home for a couple of weeks, and I watched a whole bunch of them to get pointers. But basically those courtrooms are what we call small claims. And small claims means, in Illinois, the plaintiff is suing the defendant for money, so that's the kind of case I do, right? Not criminal, but suing for money. And the amount of money that they're seeking is $10,000 or less. Only up to $10,000. So if it's more, now $10,000, that sounds like a lot of money, right? Kind of.
I'll take it.
It could be a lot of money, but it's not anything like being sued for $10 million, right? Which can happen. So $10,000 or less is small claims. And in my courtroom, we do those on Friday mornings. So I am the small claims judge in Rolling Meadows on Friday mornings, and that's where people go. And usually it's people who don't have lawyers, and they just, you know, step up and talk themselves and, you know, tell me their story, and the other side tells the story. And then, you know, I make a decision. Now, the one thing that I'll tell you about those TV shows, those really aren't courtrooms, even though they look like courtrooms. And most, even adults, don't know this. But what I like to tell people is that those TV shows are basically agreements to settle their lawsuit. Now, what do you think that means? Anybody have an idea about that? Yes?
No, I just.
Oh, well, I want you, does you have an idea? Okay, so one time I was doing my court call and I saw there was a letter in the file. If you put your hand out, because it takes me a while to explain this, then I'll get your question after. So I saw there was a letter in the file. It was from Judge Joe Brown, who is a Chicago TV judge. And it said, don't bother doing this case because it's going to my show, Judge Joe Brown. And I said, okay, so we, you know, took it off my courtroom. And what happens when those TV shows do those cases is they go searching the public records for the cases that are going to come to small claims like my courtroom. And they find one they like. They contact those people, the plaintiff and the defendant, and they say, if you come on our show, will you agree to follow the ruling of the judge. And the only way that they get on that show is if they sign and say, yes, I will follow the ruling of that judge. So basically then they have made an agreement for this judge to settle, this judge on TV, to settle their case with a ruling. What's different is, suppose the judge on TV, Judge Joe Brown, makes a ruling, says, okay, you owe her $800. And the other guy goes, I'm not going to pay. Do you think that that person who won can get that enforced in a court of law by police officers?
Yes.
No, they can't. Those TV judges and those courtrooms are not real courtrooms where we have law enforcement and police officers and, being put in jail and stuff. Can happen from that. So it's interesting because it sure looks like a regular courtroom and it acts like one, but it's really an agreement to settle their dispute. All right, yes, you have a question?
Do you have any judges for you?
Now, in Rolling Meadows, we have 24 judges. Well, right now we're down, we have a couple vacancies, but we have about 20 to 24 judges. And I'll tell you what they do in Rolling Meadows. I explain what I do with the civil type cases. We have probably about 8 courtrooms that hear traffic matters. Now, what are traffic matters? Yes?
Tickets and like going past red lights, I think.
Right, tickets that police officers write to drivers when they don't follow the law, like not stopping for a red light or driving too fast beyond the speed limit. Those driving while they're intoxicated, that's a bad one that you can go to jail for, actually. So we have eight courtrooms that deal with traffic matters. Then we have 2 courtrooms that deal with felony crimes. Does anybody know what felonies are? Yes?
Like really bad.
Really bad, serious offenses. What would be examples? Like what? Robbery, and, yes?
Someone like murders.
Murders, attempted murders, yes? Any other? Do you have another question?
No, I haven't.
What? What's your name?
Like abduction.
Child abduction, right, that's a felony. Yes? Okay, go ahead, what's your question?
Do you ever feel bad about any of your decisions?
Yeah, I feel bad, but one thing when you're just dealing with money, you're usually not locking people up, putting them in jail. So it's not quite as bad. Although I do occasionally will send a sheriff out to arrest somebody, and that is when they've been served and they don't come to court. And so if you've been served with court papers, you do have to come to court, or else they can be enforced by the sheriff coming out and getting you. And I feel bad when people get arrested, but my friend, who's a judge over there, and she does felonies, and she just did a murder trial, she's going to have to sentence somebody now, and she could be sentencing this person who's only 22 for 60 years in prison. So I think that would be hard to deal with, Yes, you have a question?
Do you work like every day or?
Every day, Monday through Friday, every day. And then we used to, just stopped recently because of budget cuts, but we used to rotate Saturday court among all 24 of us, so we would do that about twice a year. But yeah, every day. So, and one of the nice things that we do is we perform marriages. Marriages where you're not going to a church, but you want to get married before a justice of the peace. We do those too. Yes?
Like, what's the toughest case you ever been in, like, hard to make a decision?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of comes down to who you believe, and sometimes it's hard to make up your mind which side is more believable. Because you're trying, both sides are, each side is swearing to tell the truth, but a lot of times people don't, and you have to decide who's telling the truth. And so those are hard. It's hard when the two stories are totally opposite, and you have to figure out what the truth is. I want to tell you one other thing that I do, and actually Gary Newland is in my courtroom on Thursdays. We have cases where people haven't paid their rent, or they haven't paid their assessments if they live in a condo. And so again, it's being sued for money owed. But usually in that type of case, there's procedures where they can catch up with their payments. And like if you live in a condo and I rule that you owe X amount, thousands of dollars, you have like at least 60 days to pay it. So hopefully you'll be able to catch up. But I do that on Thursdays, and the rest of the time it's just regular civil cases. So let's see, who hasn't asked a question? It's you? Okay, you go ahead.
Have you ever been in like a case where like a child with someone that you knew?
Someone I know?
Yeah.
I've known the lawyers because I'll see the lawyers a lot. But if it's like one of the parties that are being represented by a lawyer, and if it's someone I know well, I will do what's called recusing myself, or meaning take it myself out of it, because it's it might look unfair, and you might not. It might be hard to be totally fair if you know someone, especially if you like them. Like if it's your relative, you do not want to hear that case. So you recuse yourself, and it gets sent to our boss judge, presiding judge, and he assigns it to a different judge to hear it. So, but that's an important thing for keeping it fair, is to not hear cases of people you know. But the lawyers that come before you that are representing their clients, you see them all the time, so you get to know them all. Yes, you have a question?
Oh, I just
Okay. And you?
What's the funnest thing about being a judge?
Well, I don't know. When I first became a judge, I thought it was cool when I walked in the room and everybody stood up. And I walked up on that bench and I said, "You may be seated." It's kind of cool to, people treat you with respect. And it may be because I'm sitting up there and I have the black gown on and there's a deputy in the courtroom, but that's pretty fun. I really enjoy myself. I like to do legal research, on the internet, looking for the cases that apply. I'll spend hours doing that. I know you guys probably are on the computer a lot, and if you like the computer, law might be something that you might be good at in the future, because there's a lot of research done on the computer. A lot of questions from that. Yes?
sorry. Do you have any idea why judges are voted in?
Why they're voted in? It's just the way, I don't really know. I mean, it's in the law. It was passed actually in the Illinois Constitution. So I know you've studied Constitution, right? But maybe the United States Constitution. But in the Illinois Constitution, it says that about half of the judges are voted in by regular voters, like your parents, and about half of the judges, the other half, are voted in by the judges that are already there. So we have two types of judges in Cook County. But I guess they just thought it would be a fair way of selecting. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
But wouldn't that mean they'd have to follow what they say that they're going to do?
Well, the one thing when judges run for office, when you have political campaigns where people have yard signs and you get mail and about the candidate. The one thing that judges are not supposed to do is say how they're going to rule in a case before it comes before them, because it's not fair, right? You want to hear each case individually. So you can't really say how you're going to rule before you actually have a case in front of you. So you're not supposed to anyways when you're campaigning. So that's a good question though. Yes? Yes, you.
Have you ever questioned whether or not you wanted to be a judge?
I kind of thought about it for many years because I was a lawyer for over 20 years, so I kind of thought about it, and I thought it might be nice, and I thought I'd like it, but it's hard to become a judge, actually. The minimum, they want you to be a lawyer for 12 years at the minimum. And then you have to run for office, which is hard. It takes a lot of time. It can be expensive. It cost me a lot of money to run, because I had to buy those yard signs and the mail that you get and all those kinds of things. So, once I decided I wanted it and it was a good time to do it, I just jumped right in and started doing it, and I was really happy to do it. It was fun, actually, because I went around and met a lot of people. I went to parents groups, and I went to nursing homes, and I went to just public places where I could meet people, voters. And so I was, doing a lot of getting out there and meeting people, and it was sort of fun for about a year. Sure. Yes.
Does the plaintiff win half the time and the defendant win half the time?
I can't really say if it's half the time, but sometimes the plaintiff wins, sometimes the defendant wins. Are some people leaving?
Yeah, just 4 of them have to go down for the.
Oh, okay. Well, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Oh, it's okay. Yes.
What made you want to become a
I thought that it would be a good milestone in my career. I was a lawyer for many years, and then I thought that would be a different angle to it, being a lawyer. When you're an attorney, what do you think attorneys do, lawyers, when they come to court? What do you think they do that's different than what judges do? Yes.
They pick a side and they have to stand on that side.
Right. They are what we call advocates, and they argue to the best that they can for their client, for their side. So there's not really any fairness in it when you're a lawyer. You are representing your client, and you have to argue your case as strongly as you can. Whereas being a judge is more neutral and just balanced. So it's a different role in the whole process. Yes?
How are you here right now? Don't you have a case or anything?
Well,
She's ditching.
yeah. I took the afternoon. Mr. Solars and I were trading voicemails for many times, trying to figure out when I wasn't going to have a trial this afternoon. I explained to you my schedule, where I hear many cases in the morning, maybe 50 or 60 at 9 o'clock, then 10, 10:30, 11. And then I'll usually schedule one trial for 1:30. And sometimes those cases get settled, or they get continued, or I just happen not to have one case scheduled. So today was a day that I didn't have one. So I took the afternoon off. Yes?
Do you ever feel that you chose the wrong side after you finished a case?
Yes, that happens every once in a while. I do. Her question was, do you ever feel like you made the wrong decision or chose the wrong side? And usually I think I've done the right thing, but every once in a while I'll start having second thoughts. If I'm having second thoughts, then you better believe that the lawyers on each side are thinking I made the wrong decision. And what they will do is come into my courtroom after my ruling with a written motion, and it's called a motion to reconsider. And it's wanting me to reconsider my ruling. And what they're supposed to do in this motion is to write out all the mistakes that I made. And if it's a mistake in law, like I applied the law wrong, or if I made a factual mistake, like I didn't understand the facts, they'll point that all out, and they'll try to get me to change my ruling. And every once in a while, I do change my ruling, especially if I was wrong on the law, because sometimes the law is pretty complicated, and I might not have been aware of some area of the law that I hadn't researched or they didn't explain. And if it's wrong on the law, you don't want to make a wrong decision. The thing that happens from my courtroom, I'm at the first level of judges in courtrooms, the very first level when people have issues or cases. And then after I make my ruling, they can appeal my ruling to an intermediate court called an appellate court in Illinois. Appellate, and then if they don't like the appellate court ruling, they can go to the Illinois Supreme Court. And that's the last court that they can go to in Illinois. And so they can keep appealing. They can appeal my ruling twice, appellate court and Supreme Court. And, you know, I don't really want to get reversed by the upper court, you know, because then the upper court writes a decision saying that my decision was wrong and reverses my decision. I would rather reverse it myself if I think I was wrong. So, but, yeah, I can't remember the last time it happened, but I have occasionally done that, so. Yes?
How many cases do you think you've done in your whole career being a judge?
Oh my God, thousands and thousands. Because I can hear over 100 a day, and then I've been a judge 10 years, so it's just, you know, I don't know how many. A lot. Yes?
Well, on Saturdays that you used to rotate, were you ever in the felony court?
It is kind of a felony courtroom that we do on Saturdays. It's called the bond court. And what it is, it's for people that were arrested on Friday night, so that they don't have to sit in jail all weekend waiting for a judge to decide how much money they would have to post in their bond in order to be released before their trial. So that is a felony courtroom, but it's the very, very first stage of a felony case. It's just to set their bond. And basically do you not understand what a bond is? Maybe I should explain that. Okay, so you've been arrested.
They've done well.
You've been, you know, let's say, nobody here, but let's just say you stole something from a store, okay? Which you should never do, because that is a felony. It could be a felony, depending on how valuable what you stole is. Okay, so you stole something and a police officer arrested you. Well, you aren't free to leave, right? When a police officer arrests you, you can't just walk out of the jail, right? You're under arrest. So you're brought before a judge, and the attorney for the prosecutor, he or she says what you did, allegedly. It hasn't been proven yet, but alleges what you did. And then the judge will say, okay, $10,000 bond. What that means is that you're going to pay into the clerk's system $10,000, and then you can be released and you can go home. But you're promising that every time that your court case is up, you're going to be there in court. If you don't show in court after you promised to be there and you posted money, we take your money. You lose the $10,000. So that's what bond is. It's like security that you're going to come to court. So again, the bond court on Saturdays was for just, you know, right after you got arrested to determine what your bond is, and it's just the very first step in a felony case. Question?
Do you know anyone that does like animal neglection court cases?
Well, I have had a few cases where somebody sued like a veterinarian hospital or a pet sitter, and they were suing for either return of their pet or for money that they had to spend on the pet. But it is possible to be so, you know, abusive to an animal that you can be charged with a crime.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. There are laws on that. Again, those are, I don't do the criminal cases, so I wouldn't do them, but there are cases like that, and those are kind of sad. I have 2 dogs and 2 chinchillas, and so I'm very pro animals. Yes?
How often does the wrong person get pulled?
How often in my courtroom or just general?
Just general.
The wrong person?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Oh, wow. I have no idea. I don't know a number for you. I mean, there is now, as you may have heard about, with Northwestern University, and it's actually not their law school, it's their, more like their journalism, where you learn to be a newspaper reporter. They have a center called the Center for Wrongful Convictions, and they're trying to study the old cases where people were convicted of very, very serious crimes like murder and have been put in jail for the rest of their lives. And they're looking at the old cases to see if maybe there was a wrongful conviction and it was a mistake. And some of them have been overturned. We have, you know, now with technology, we have a brand new thing in the last 10 years, DNA. Do you all know what DNA is?
Yes.
What is DNA?
Oh, she left.
Yes?
It's what makes your eye color and your hair, and it's just like what makes
It's a code that makes
It's a code, right, it's individual to you. No one else has your same DNA.
like your fingerprint or something. Like it's
Well, fingerprints are not foolproof. I mean, they can make mistakes, but it's like fingerprints in that it identifies a person, and it does it very, very well. And this is a technology that's just happened in the last decade, and so they're using DNA tests now to determine that somebody was wrongfully convicted and should not have been sent to jail, and that it was a mistake. So they've been, you know. But as far as answering your question, what percent, I have no idea, and I hope it's not many, but we do the best we can with what we
And
have.
my dad will tell me every now and then,
Yeah.
oh, there was a person put in jail for 8 years and they didn't do anything.
Yeah, those, it's very sad. Yeah. So, let's see. Question?
Do you like the way the judicial branch works, or do you think there could be some things that could be changed?
Well, on the whole, I think it's pretty fair. I guess the biggest thing would be that it would be good if cases went faster, quicker. You know, sometimes you can be in a lawsuit in litigation for several years. Usually the higher amount of money, like the millions of dollars cases where, you know, they can go on for years. And it would be good to, and we are always trying to find ways to improve the timing, but it's hard to do, so that's one thing. We have in the court, did you know that Cook County, what is Cook County? Anybody know? Yes?
Me?
Yes.
Cook County is where, like, I know it as, like, where the,
What towns are there?
like, I don't know how to explain.
Anybody know what Cook County is? Go ahead.
I know the towns.
What towns?
Like Buffalo Grove, Mount Prospect,
Arlington Heights. And the biggest town, it's really not a town, it's a city, in Cook County is Chicago. Right. City of Chicago, and then all the suburbs, like Arlington Heights and Mount Prospect. Okay, so we're in Cook County, right? We live in Cook County and we go to school here. I work in Cook County. Cook County has the largest court system in the world.
Bad.
The largest court system in the world is Cook County. What?
Is that good or bad?
Well, I don't know. But I mean, we always say it. It's like one of the big things that I think that in bigger areas like Los Angeles, which is I think larger in population than Cook County, they will have the city of Los Angeles have its own separate courts, and then they'll have all the suburbs like, you know, where Disney World is and all that, Disneyland, and Anaheim, and all those suburbs have their own separate courts. And in Cook County, it's all unified. So that's why maybe it's bigger, because we unified the suburbs with the city. So, City of Chicago. Yes?
Have you ever had somebody in your courtroom, like, break, like, during a lawsuit, break the United States Constitution or their own Constitution?
Well, I can't think of one recently, so It doesn't happen too much. Usually as a judge too, I try not to rule on constitutional issues. They tend to be very complicated and big. And if one thing they tell you in that new judge school is if you can rule on the facts or a law that was passed and not the Constitution, it's better to do that, because when you make a constitutional ruling, it's a real big deal, and it has to go to the Attorney General of Illinois, and it most likely is going to get appealed up to the Illinois Supreme Court. But there is one thing that our Constitution guarantees every citizen, both the United States Constitution, which I know you've studied, and the Illinois Constitution, and it applies to our court system, and that's called due process of law. Have you heard of that? And what do you think that is? Due process. First of all, how do we spell that? Does anybody know how to spell it? Yes?
D-U-E-T-R space P-R-O-C-E-S.
Right. That's due process. Right. And what does it mean? Okay. You studied it. Tell me what it means. It's a hard concept. This is why we don't like to do constitutional things.
Yeah.
Yes, what do you think?
Like everybody has equal rights, and like everybody has issues. Like no one is better than other one or gets like more respect or something.
That's part of it. Yes, equal rights before the courts. But it kind of applies to the way things get heard. And I kind of referred to it when you try to listen to both sides and be fair. It's kind of a procedural thing, too, that you get your due process of law. Let's just suppose, okay, you are, how old are you guys? 11? Okay, so 10 years from now, when you're 21, and you have a job, working at Jewel, okay? And let's say, for some reason, you got fired. Your manager fired you. That's not going to happen, but let's just say that. And let's suppose that your manager did not tell you why you got fired. Didn't tell you why. Is that fair?
What if it was obvious?
Maybe it was obvious. It could have been obvious. I mean, this is our hypothetical. We can say whatever we want as far as what it might have been. But yeah, if it was on tape, maybe they have the security tapes, and you did something, like stole something from the store or whatever. But due process of law is a concept that we deal with that refers to fairness in everything that happens to you. So we like to think that the employer at Jewel is going to bring you into their office and say, hey, look, we saw you do something. It's on tape here. And explain it to you, right? Before they just say, oh, you're fired. Or maybe give you some notice and give you a few days to where you can, before you have to leave. That's one idea. Another due process of law issue is when we deal with different groups of people. And one really good example that we have is men and women. It used to be that women didn't have the right to vote until about 1920-something. Women did not have the right to vote in our country. And if we ever had a law like that now, it would violate due process of law, because it's just not fair, right, to have one group not be able to vote and the other. Speaking of women, Cook County has about half women judges, and so we're doing pretty well, I think. It's a good job for women, and I would encourage any of you gals, if you're thinking of becoming lawyers, that you think also about becoming a judge. And as it happens, United States of America's first woman lawyer. Anybody know who that is? Anybody know? Probably not. She was trying to become a lawyer around 1850 or 1860. And she was from Chicago. And her name was Myra, M-Y-R-A, Bradwell, B-R-A-D-W-E-L-L. And she was married to a lawyer, and she did a lot of his legal work in his office. And she also was the editor of a legal newspaper that all the lawyers read. And it came out every day, and it's still in existence. It's now called the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. I should have brought one for you. But it's a newspaper that comes out every day and explains the cases that have recently come out. It wasn't called that back then when she was the editor of it. She was obviously very smart, and she could write newspapers. She could handle the writing the briefs and things for her husband. So she applied to become a lawyer. And in the old days, you didn't have to go to law school to become a lawyer. Now you do. You have to attend law school for 3 years after college. But in the old days, you could do what's called apprenticeship, and you could just work in a lawyer's office for a number of years, and then you would learn enough that way to become a lawyer. So she applied to become a lawyer to the Illinois Supreme Court, and she was rejected. And then she appealed her case to the United States Supreme Court, and she was rejected. And the United States Supreme Court said that women are too frail, that was the words they used, women are too frail to become lawyers. She kept applying and getting rejected, and she eventually, after many times applying, was accepted to become a lawyer.
She's determined.
Yeah, she was very determined. And one of her most famous clients, you know how lawyers have clients that they represent in court? Her most famous client was Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. And Mary Todd Lincoln, unfortunately, had a rather difficult life. Some say she was crazy, but she was. Do you know the word eccentric? She was just a little strange, I would say. She thought people were after her and after her clothing, and at least this is what they said about her. And so what happened was, after President Lincoln was assassinated, you remember when John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Lincoln? So it was just Mrs. Lincoln, and she had sons, and they had her committed to a mental health hospital where she could not get out. And she did have issues. I mean, she was difficult, and the boys didn't know how to deal with it. And anyways, going back, and these, remember what I told you, when you're dealing with lawsuits and things, it's not always pleasant. It seems to be the bad things in life. So this is an example of, something like that. So Myra Bradwell, America's first lawyer, represented Mary Todd Lincoln, and eventually did get her released from the mental health hospital. So she did a good job for her client. Yes?
Oh, well, here in this book that we use for, studying, Constitution, it says due process of law is the requirement that procedures used by government in gathering information be reasonable.
So it was like procedures, we're talking about we want fair procedures, and a big thing is also notice, fair notice, like a reasonable opportunity to be heard, which we might apply in that employment case where the person was fired. You'd want some kind of notice, and maybe the opportunity to argue against it or defend it. So, but good, that's a good definition. Any other questions before I
Just one.
skedoodle? Yes?
Can judges buy custom mallets and these?
Gavels? Yeah, you can buy them, but I don't use them. Most of us don't use them. That's another thing they do on TV, but we don't. But I have a crystal one that sits on my bookshelf, and a wooden one that somebody gave me, but they just sit on my bookshelf. I don't use them. So, a couple more questions, and then. Oh, I did want to tell you, if you ever do a class trip to Rolling Meadows, we do have a jail there, So people are always like, wow, let's see that jail. But it's just to hold the prisoners before they get brought up to the courtroom. They take them from the main jail downtown in the city of Chicago and they bring them out here. If you ever see those white school buses driving around the suburbs, and it might say Cook County Sheriff on it, that's a prisoner bus. And they're bringing them. Yeah. You don't want anyone
Better not
else.
see you in there, guys.
Right. Or you don't want to see anyone getting out of those buses without. We do have a jail there. So.
All right, to respect Judge Tristano's time, can you guys just do like really, really quick questions then?
And just a couple more.
Yeah, then.
Yes?
Are any of like your cases like
Funny? A little bit. A little bit. I just did a trial yesterday where someone was suing a paint shop. They had bought a really fancy motorcycle and they wanted a fancy paint job on it. Unfortunately, the paint shop really messed up the job, and I could see it in the pictures. There were bubbles on the paint, and it was a very expensive Harley Davidson fancy motorbike. And it was pretty obvious that the paint shop messed it up, and I couldn't figure out why they went all the way to a trial before me. They should have settled, maybe for less money, because they messed up. So the defense lawyer, when he was arguing at the end, he was just, you know, walking on, but judge, and I had a hard time not smiling at him, because, you know, I knew he was just grandstanding for his client, because he didn't really have a defense. So he was funny, but I try not, you shouldn't laugh, obviously. You try to be straight-faced and, you know,
that's gonna be hard for Mallory.
So that would work.
That'd be very hard for you.
No, you can't start laughing because, you know, in China, I heard a story once, I think this is true, in the colonial times in China, in their courts, the judges wore masks. So you could not even see their faces because they didn't do it to be scary, they just did it so that you wouldn't get a sense of how the judge was going to rule, and it was going to be very impartial, just blank masks. So, yes?
Can judges be on juries?
Yes, I've been called to jury duty. Usually, they will dismiss the judges because they figure the judge is going to, you know, influence the jury too much. But I do know some judges who are friends of mine that actually did serve on the jury. So yeah, everybody is eligible to serve. So, yes?
Have you ever seen the Supreme Court smile?
No, I have not. I've only been to the Supreme Court a couple of times, and they were not smiling when I was there. But yeah, I think they pretty much know not to smile. Yes?
What was your favorite court?
What?
Case that you judged? What was your favorite case that you judged?
I don't know. Well, a good one I had was it was a little bit funny. It was somebody suing for return of a cat. Oh my God! And it was hard to. It was an elderly lady that was sick, and her daughter purchased the cat for her, and it was a very expensive purebred Persian cat. You know those white, long fur cats, and very expensive. And the elderly lady who was sick had a caretaker who was in the house, you know, like her home health nurse taking care of her, and she got very attached to the cat. And she testified that the elderly lady said that she could keep the cat if she ever passed away, which she did. And so we had all these people trying to testify about what the cat wanted. And I was like, and then the other side, the lawyer said, objection to the feelings of the cat, because, you know, you can't really cross-examine a cat. You can't bring the cat in and say, okay, who do you want to be with? So it was kind of a funny case. I was telling the other judges, and they're like, oh, glad I don't have to hear stuff like that.
If it could talk, it could probably testify for it.
Right, if it could talk, but it can't talk. And that's a very important, you know what, I might just sort of wrap up on this, but the ability to cross-examine witnesses, like, say there's a case against you, and somebody gets up and testifies. A really important part of due process of law, of being fair, is that the other side gets to stand up and ask questions of them and to see if their testimony is really true, and try to trip them up maybe in the lie that they're telling. And a good lawyer, which your father is a very good lawyer, he does good trials. he'll know how to ask questions that will maybe trip up a witness and show that they're really not telling the truth. And obviously when you have a cat case, you can't ask the cat any questions, so it was pretty funny. Okay, last question. I'm losing my voice.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Quick one, Rhett.
One last question.
Have you ever seen anyone like that was in court, like just walking around or just on the streets or anything? But have you seen them in public?
Seeing people in public? Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, you know, it's just people, so you might run into them. I live in a different, I don't live around here, and I'm sort of glad I don't, because I would rather not have to do cases of people that I know. If I know them really well, I'm going to have to send it to my boss to send it to a different judge. So. But yeah, it's fine. We just say hello.
Well, Judge Tristano, thank you so much for coming out
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
speaking with us and answering our questions.
Thank you. Thank you
We
for
got a little gift for you, so just thank you for coming.
This is exactly what
We just really appreciate it. It was a good way to culminate the unit that we studied.
And you know what, boys and girls, you ask very good questions. I can tell that you're all very intelligent, and you should keep it in the back of your head. Maybe someday after college you'll go to law school, and maybe after being a lawyer, you'll become a judge.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Do you need your autograph?
They really do want your autograph.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. All right.
Just don't make sure something's written before.
Oh yeah, don't write anything above it. I swear to.
So if you see here, the reason that one of the boys asked, do you ever see the Supreme Court smiling? In this picture, there's two women smiling.
Oh, yeah. You know, that was just for the picture, though. I think if I were having a picture taken for, like, campaigning or something, I would smile. But yeah. I had to get this out.
So we're going to do that tomorrow, but we'll do the CNN.
Wait, Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah.
Can I show you these experiments?
Yeah, while we get it started though, okay then?
Wait, can I do these?
Well, you're gonna make them.
Yeah.
Mr. Shiller, do you want me to stop the cameras?
Yes, please.
Hi!